They said Lord Adrian Blackthorne never smiled, that his gaze could freeze men mid-sentence, that entire ballrooms fell silent when he entered. What they didn't know was that on a rain-soaked Tuesday in March, a shopkeeper's daughter told him to get out, not because she knew who he was, but because he was dripping water on her freshly mopped floor. And for the first time in 20 years, Adrian Blackthorne laughed, really laughed. That single moment would unravel everything he'd spent a lifetime building, and neither of them saw it coming. If you want to know how a man with everything lost it all, for a woman who had nothing, and why he'd do it again, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday afternoon, turning London's cobblestone streets into rivers of gray. Adrian stood under the awning of a building he'd never noticed before. Small, wedged between a tailor's shop and a printer's office, with a hand-painted sign that read Hartwell Confections in fading gold letters. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be 3 streets over, meeting with his solicitor about the ongoing dispute with Lord Pembridge over shipping routes. But his carriage had broken an axle, and his driver had disappeared into the rain to find a wheelwright, leaving Adrian stranded. The door to the shop stood slightly ajar, and the scent of sugar and butter drifted out into the wet air. Adrian pushed it open without thinking. The interior was cramped and warm, lined with shelves of glass jars filled with candies, lemon drops, peppermints, crystallized ginger. A small counter stood at the back, and behind it, a woman was bent over a ledger, her dark hair pinned up haphazardly, a pencil tucked behind one ear. She didn't look up. Adrian cleared his throat. Nothing. He stepped forward, his boots squelching on the floorboards, and she jerked her head up sharply. "Out," she said. Adrian blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "You're dripping everywhere." She gestured at the floor with her pencil. "I just mopped. If you're not buying anything, go stand outside until the rain stops." For a moment, Adrian simply stared at her. In his entire life, 38 years of it, no one had ever spoken to him like that, not even servants who'd known him since childhood. He looked down at the small puddle forming around his feet. "I apologize. I didn't realize—" "Well, now you do." She returned her attention to the ledger. Adrian stood there, water still dripping from the hem of his coat, feeling absurd. He should have left, should have walked back out into the rain and waited for his driver like a sensible person. Instead, he said, "I'll take a pound of the lemon drops." Her eyes flicked up again, narrower this time. "Will you now?" "Yes." "Got money for it?" The question was so startling that Adrian actually laughed, a short, sharp sound that seemed to surprise them both. "I assure you," he said carefully, "I can afford a pound of lemon drops." She studied him for a long moment, then set down her pencil with a sigh. "Fine, but wipe your feet first. There's a mat by the door." Adrian glanced behind him. There was indeed a mat, worn and frayed, but serviceable. He stepped back and made a show of scraping his boots across it, then returned to the counter. The woman had already pulled down one of the glass jars and was scooping the pale yellow candies onto a brass scale. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, and Adrian found himself watching the way her fingers wrapped around the scoop, the slight furrow between her brows as she adjusted the weights. "You don't recognize me," he said. It wasn't a question. She didn't look up. "Should I?" "Most people do." "Then most people must have better memories than me." She poured the candies into a paper cone and twisted the top closed. "That'll be 6pence." Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out a sovereign. Her expression didn't change. "I don't have change for that." "Keep it." Now she did look at him, really look at him, and her eyes were sharp and gray and entirely unimpressed. "I'm not a charity case, and this isn't a brothel. Either you've got 6pence or you can come back when you do." Adrian felt something shift in his chest, something he couldn't quite name. He dug into his pocket again and came up with the exact amount. She took it without comment, dropped the coins into a wooden box under the counter, and held out the paper cone. "Thank you," Adrian said. "Don't drip on the way out." He left the shop with the lemon drops in his hand and a strange, unsettled feeling in his stomach. By the time his driver found him 20 minutes later, Adrian had eaten 3 of the candies and memorized the address. He told himself he wouldn't go back. For 2 days, he kept that promise. He attended meetings, signed documents, hosted a dinner for a visiting diplomat from Prussia. He He was Lord Adrian Blackthorne, Duke of Ashford, one of the most powerful men in England. He had responsibilities, obligations. He did not have time to think about a shopkeeper's daughter who didn't know his name. On the third day, he found himself standing outside Hartwell Confections again. The shop was busier this time. 2 women browsing the shelves, a boy of about 10 counting coins at the counter. The woman, Eliza, he'd learned her name by asking his housekeeper who ran the confectionery on Ludgate Street, was wrapping purchases and answering questions with the same brisk efficiency she'd shown him. Adrian waited until the shop cleared, then stepped inside. She glanced up, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or annoyance. "Lemon drops again?" she asked. "Actually, I was wondering what else you'd recommend." Eliza set down the parcel she'd been wrapping and regarded him with open suspicion. "You came all the way back here to ask my opinion on candy? Is that so strange?" "Yes." Adrian smiled despite himself. "Why?" "Because you're clearly not hurting for money, which means you could buy sweets anywhere in London. Gunter's, if you wanted something fancy. But you came back to a shop the size of a broom closet to ask me what I think." She crossed her arms. "So either you're very particular or you're very bored." "Perhaps I'm both." "Then you're wasting your time and mine." She wasn't trying to be charming. She wasn't flirting. She was genuinely, straightforwardly annoyed, and Adrian found it more refreshing than anything he'd experienced in months. "The peppermints," he said. "Are they good?" "They're fine." "Just fine?" "They're peppermints. They taste like peppermint. If you're expecting a revelation, you're going to be disappointed." She pulled down the jar anyway. "How much do you want?" "Half a pound." She measured them out in silence, and Adrian watched her hands again, calloused, he noticed now, with a small burn scar on her left thumb. "Do you run this shop alone?" he asked. "That's none of your business. I'm simply making conversation." "I didn't ask you to." Adrian laughed again, that same startled sound. "You're remarkably rude, you know. And you're remarkably nosy." She twisted the paper cone closed and set it on the counter. 6pence. He paid her, took the peppermints, and left. He came back the next day. It became a pattern. Every 2 or 3 days, Adrian would find an excuse to be in that part of the city. A meeting that ran long, a detour on the way to Parliament, a sudden interest in the bookshop 3 doors down. And each time, he'd stop at Hartwell Confections. Eliza never seemed pleased to see him, but she never turned him away either. Slowly, so slowly he almost didn't notice it happening, the edge in her voice began to soften. "You're back," she said one afternoon in early April. "I am." "Running low on peppermints already?" "Tragically, yes." She shook her head, but there was the ghost of a smile at the corner of her mouth. "You're a terrible liar." "What makes you say that?" "Because I sold you half a pound 3 days ago, and unless you're eating them by the fistful, there's no way you finished them." She pulled down the jar anyway. "So what is it really? You like the shop? The location? Or are you just that desperate for someone to insult you?" Adrian considered the question seriously. "I think," he said slowly, "I like that you don't care who I am." Eliza paused, the scoop halfway to the scale. "Should I care?" "Most people do." "You said that before." She resumed measuring, "But you never told me why." "Would it matter if I did?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a moment Adrian felt as though she could see straight through every carefully constructed wall he'd built around himself. "No," she said finally, "I don't think it would." And that, more than anything else, was why he kept coming back. By May, they were having actual conversations. Adrian learned that Eliza ran the shop with her younger sister, Margaret, who had weak lungs and couldn't work full days. Their father had died 2 years ago, and their mother had followed 6 months later. The shop was all they had left, and Eliza was determined to keep it running no matter what. "The rent goes up every year," she said one afternoon, wiping down the counter. "And the landlord's been hinting he'd rather lease the space to someone who can pay more. A haberdasher, probably, or another printer." "Can't you negotiate?" She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "With what leverage? I'm a woman running a sweet shop. He knows I can't afford to move, and he knows I can't afford to fight him. So I smile, pay what he asks, and hope he doesn't push any harder." Adrian felt a flash of anger on her behalf. That's unconscionable. That's business. She tossed the rag into a bucket behind the counter. Besides, I've dealt with worse. You learn to keep your head down and your books balanced. You shouldn't have to. Eliza gave him a strange look. That's a nice thought, but nice thoughts don't pay rent. Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that he could fix this with a single letter, that he could make her landlord disappear if she asked, but he didn't, because the moment he did, everything would change. She'd know who he was, and the careful, fragile thing they'd built would shatter. So instead, he bought another pound of lemon drops and left. It was Margaret who finally pieced it together. Adrian had been visiting the shop for nearly 2 months when he arrived one afternoon to find a girl of about 16 behind the counter, pale and thin, with Eliza's gray eyes and a shrewd expression that said she missed nothing. "You're him," she said. Adrian froze. "I beg your pardon?" "The man Eliza won't stop talking about." Margaret leaned forward, studying him. "She says you're strange. That you come in here and buy sweets you probably don't even eat, and you ask questions like you're actually interested in the answers." "I am interested." "Why?" It was such a direct question that Adrian didn't have a ready answer. "Because your sister is unusual. That's one word for it." Margaret grinned. "She'll be back in a minute. Went to the market to get more sugar. You can wait if you want." Adrian did. When Eliza returned, her arms full of parcels, she stopped short at the sight of him. "You're early," she said. "Am I?" "You usually come in the afternoon. It's barely noon." Margaret coughed, very obviously fake, and disappeared into the back room. Eliza set the parcels on the counter and began unpacking them. "She likes you," she said without looking up. "Does she?" "Don't let it go to your head. She likes everyone." Eliza pulled out a sack of sugar and hefted it onto the shelf. "But she's got good instincts. If she didn't trust you, she'd have chased you out with a broom by now." "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should." She finally looked at him. "Why do you keep coming here?" The question caught him off guard. "I thought we'd established that." "No, you said you liked that I don't care who you are, but that's not a reason to keep showing up. So what is it really?" Adrian hesitated. The truth was too big, too complicated. He barely understood it himself. "I'm tired," he said finally. Eliza frowned. "Of what?" "Of being looked at and never seen. Of walking into rooms where everyone knows exactly who I'm supposed to be, and no one cares who I actually am." He met her eyes. "But when I come here, you don't see a title or a name. You just see me." For a long moment, Eliza didn't say anything. Then she sighed and reached for the jar of lemon drops. "You're still paying for these," she said. Adrian smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Well, summer arrived, and with it, a heat that turned London into a sluggish, sticky mess. The shop became stifling, and Eliza started propping the door open to let in whatever breeze she could find. Adrian visited more frequently now, sometimes twice a week. They talked about everything and nothing, books they'd read, places they'd never been, the small frustrations of daily life. Eliza told him about the baker down the street who kept trying to poach her customers. Adrian told her about the absurdity of parliamentary debates that lasted 6 hours and accomplished nothing. He didn't tell her about the pressure from his mother to marry, about the carefully curated list of eligible young women, all with impeccable pedigrees and dowries large enough to fund a small army, about the expectations that followed him everywhere like a shadow. In the shop, he could forget all of that. One particularly hot afternoon in July, Adrian arrived to find Eliza sitting on the front step, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. "It's too hot to be inside," she said by way of greeting. Adrian sat down beside her. "Then why are you here?" "Where else would I be?" "Somewhere cooler. The park, perhaps?" She snorted. "I don't have time for the park. I've got inventory to count and orders to fill." "Then let me help." Eliza turned to look at him, eyebrows raised. "You want to count jars of peppermints?" "Why not?" "Because you're—" She stopped herself. "I'm what?" "Nothing." She stood up, brushing off her skirt. "Fine, you can count, but if you break anything, you're buying it." They spent the next hour in the back room, Adrian calling out numbers while Eliza recorded them in her ledger. It was mundane, ridiculous work, and Adrian couldn't remember the last time he'd enjoyed anything more. "You're good at this. Eliza said at one point. At counting? At pretending you're not somebody important. Adrian's hand stilled on the jar he was holding. What makes you think I'm important? I'm not blind. You've got tailored clothes, clean hands, and you don't flinch when you hand over a sovereign. Plus, you talk like you've been to university. She didn't look up from her ledger. I've always known you weren't just some clerk or tradesman. I just didn't care enough to ask. Adrian set down the jar carefully. And now? Now I'm asking. He could have lied, should have lied, but sitting there in the cramped back room of a shop that smelled like sugar and ink, Adrian found he didn't want to. I'm a duke, he said quietly. Eliza's pencil stopped moving. A what? A duke. The Duke of Ashford, to be precise. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she set down her pencil and turned to face him fully. You're joking. I'm not. The Duke of Ashford. Her voice was flat. The man who owns half of Mayfair and has a seat in the House of Lords. Yes. And you've been coming to my shop for 3 months, buying candy and counting peppermints, and you didn't think to mention this? Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. I didn't think it mattered. Didn't think it... Eliza stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You didn't think it mattered that you've been lying to me this entire time? I never lied. You let me believe you were someone you're not. I am exactly who I've always been, Adrian said, rising to his feet. The only difference is, now you know my title. That's not a small difference, her voice cracked. Do you have any idea how this looks? A duke slumming in a shop in Ludgate, amusing himself with the poor shopkeeper. That's not what this is. Then what is it? She crossed her arms, eyes blazing. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been playing at being normal, and I've been your entertainment. No. The word came out sharper than Adrian intended. You've been the only real thing in my life for months. The only place where I didn't have to perform or calculate or play politics. And I didn't tell you because I knew this would happen. I knew the moment you learned who I was, everything would change. Of course it changes. Eliza's hands were shaking. You're a duke. I sell sweets. We don't exist in the same world. We exist in this one. Adrian gestured at the cramped room around them. Right here. This is real. No, it's not. Her voice had gone quiet. It's a fantasy, and I can't afford fantasies. She walked past him, back into the main shop, and Adrian followed. Eliza, I think you should leave. Please. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. She wouldn't look at him. You're a duke. I'm a shopkeeper. That's all there is. Adrian stood there, every instinct screaming at him to argue, to fix this, to make her understand. But the set of her shoulders, the careful blankness of her expression, he recognized it. It was the same armor he wore every day in public. So he left. He didn't go back for a week. In that time, Adrian attended 3 dinners, 2 balls, and a garden party. He smiled at the right people, said the right things, and felt absolutely nothing. His mother cornered him after the garden party. Lady Catherine Fenwick was asking about you, she said, adjusting her gloves. She's a lovely girl, well-bred, accomplished. Her father's an earl. I'm not interested. Adrian, you're nearly 40. You need to marry someone suitable and produce an heir. This isn't optional. I'm aware of my responsibilities. Are you? Because you've been distracted for months, disappearing for hours at a time, avoiding social obligations. I've attended every event you've asked me to. Physically, yes, but your mind is elsewhere. She studied him with sharp eyes. What's her name? Adrian went very still. Excuse me? Don't insult my intelligence. I've seen that look before. Your father had it when he was courting me. So who is she? It doesn't matter. It does if she's unsuitable. The word hit like a slap. Adrian turned to face his mother fully. Unsuitable how? You know exactly how. You're the Duke of Ashford. Whoever you marry will become a duchess. She needs to be able to navigate society, manage a household, represent the family name. His mother's expression softened slightly. I'm not trying to be cruel, Adrian, but there are expectations. And if I don't care about expectations, then you'll make both your lives miserable. She placed a hand on his arm. I know you think love conquers all, but it doesn't. Love without respect, without social standing, It curdles. It turns bitter. I don't want that for you. Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that Eliza was worth more than any titled lady in London. But he couldn't, because he didn't know if Eliza would even speak to him again. Well, on the 8th day, he went back. The shop was quiet when he entered. Eliza was at the counter, and when she saw him, something flashed across her face. Relief, maybe, or regret. "I'm sorry," Adrian said before she could speak. "For what?" "For not telling you sooner. For making you feel like I was playing a game." He stepped closer. "But I need you to know. This was never a game to me. You were never a game." Eliza's hands tightened on the edge of the counter. "Why are you here, Adrian?" "Because I can't stay away." The words came out raw, honest. "Because every room I walk into feels empty now. Because when I'm with you, I'm not a duke or a title or a set of obligations. I'm just me. And what happens when we leave this shop?" Her voice was quiet. "When you go back to your world and I go back to mine. Then we find a way to bridge them." "There is no bridge." She shook her head. "You live in Mayfair. I live above a shop. You have a seat in Parliament. I have a ledger that barely balances. We're not—" "I love you." The words fell into the space between them like stones into water. Eliza stared at him. "What?" "I love you," Adrian said again, steadier this time. "I've been trying not to, trying to convince myself it was just fascination or curiosity or loneliness. But it's not. It's love." "You can't love me." "I already do." "Adrian, I know it's impossible. I know society will tear us apart. I know my family will disown me and yours will think I'm taking advantage of you. I know all of it." He took her hands in his, "But I also know that I would rather fight for this, for you, than spend the rest of my life in a marriage that means nothing." Eliza's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." "I'm asking you to give up everything," she whispered. "Your reputation, your standing, maybe even your family. And for what? A shopkeeper who can't even afford new shoes? For a woman who sees me, really sees me. For a woman who makes me laugh and challenges me and doesn't care about my title." Adrian squeezed her hands. "For you." A tear slipped down her cheek. "This is insane." "Probably. We'll both regret it." "I doubt that." "Adrian," he kissed her. It was soft and tentative and utterly perfect. When they broke apart, Eliza was crying in earnest. "I don't know how to be what you need," she said. "You already are." "I'll embarrass you." "Impossible. Your mother will hate me. She'll come around." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Or she won't. But I've spent my entire life doing what other people expect. Just this once, I want to do what I want." Eliza laughed through her tears. "You're an idiot." "Probably. This won't be easy." "I know." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something, doubt maybe, or hesitation. But Adrian had never been more certain of anything in his life. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay?" "Okay." She took a shaky breath. "But if your mother throws me out of your house, I'm blaming you." Adrian grinned and kissed her again. "Fair enough." Outside, the rain had started again, turning the streets into mirrors. But inside Hartwell Confections, surrounded by jars of lemon drops and peppermints, Adrian Blackthorne felt like he'd finally come home. He had no idea how much harder it was about to get. The announcement came 3 weeks later, and Adrian made sure it was impossible to ignore. He didn't whisper it to a few select friends over brandy. He didn't let his mother manage it with carefully worded letters to key families. He stood up at Lord Pemberton's annual summer ball, one of the most attended events of the season, and said it out loud. "I'm engaged to Miss Eliza Hartwell of Ludgate Street. The wedding will be in September." The ballroom went silent, not the polite, expectant silence that preceded toasts, but the shocked, airless kind that happened when someone had just set fire to the curtains. Adrian's mother went white. Lady Pemberton dropped her champagne glass. And somewhere near the back, someone laughed, high and sharp, and quickly stifled. Adrian didn't look at any of them. He looked at Eliza, standing beside him in a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit. Her chin lifted and her hands clenched so tight her knuckles had gone pale. "Well," she muttered under her breath. "That went about as well as expected." He wanted to take her hand, but she'd asked him not to. Not here, not in front of everyone. So instead he said, "We can leave now." And look like we're running away? No. She straightened her shoulders. We stay until the music starts again. Then we leave like normal people. The music didn't start for another 5 minutes, and they were the longest 5 minutes of Adrian's life. People stared, people whispered. A few turned their backs entirely, as though by not looking at him, they could pretend this hadn't happened. His mother materialized at his elbow, her face composed but her voice shaking. "My study, now!"
"Mother, now Adrian."
Eliza glanced at him, and he saw the fear in her eyes despite the defiant set of her jaw. "Go," she said quietly. "I'll wait here. I'm not leaving you alone. I'm a grown woman. I can handle a few stares." She gave him a small, tight smile. "Go talk to your mother before she has an apoplexy." Adrian followed his mother through the crowd, feeling every eye track his movement. She led him to a small room off the main hallway and shut the door hard enough to rattle the frame. "Have you lost your mind?" she hissed. "No. You just announced your engagement to a shopkeeper in front of half the peerage." "Her name is Eliza." "I don't care what her name is." His mother was pacing now, her skirt swishing sharply with each turn. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The scandal this will cause?" "I'm aware." "Are you? Because I don't think you understand the gravity of this situation. You're not some country squire who can marry whomever he pleases. You're the Duke of Ashford. Your choices affect more than just yourself." "Then perhaps it's time the duchy learned to adapt." His mother stopped pacing and turned to face him fully. "You think you're being noble, romantic, but all you're doing is destroying your reputation and hers. Society will never accept her." "They'll have to." "No, Adrian, they won't. They'll smile to her face and shred her behind her back. They'll exclude her from gatherings, ignore her at parties, make sure she knows she doesn't belong." His mother's voice softened, but it was worse somehow. "And eventually she'll hate you for it, for putting her in an impossible position." "Eliza is stronger than you think. Strength has nothing to do with it. This isn't a battle you can win through sheer will." She sat down heavily in a chair. "I know you care for her. I can see it. But caring isn't enough. You need to think about what comes next." "I have thought about it. Have you thought about children? About how they'll be treated when their mother is considered beneath their station? About how every business dealing, every political alliance will be colored by this choice?" She looked up at him. "I'm not trying to be cruel, Adrian. I'm trying to save you from a lifetime of regret." Adrian felt something hard settle in his chest. "I'm marrying her, mother, with or without your approval." His mother closed her eyes. "Then you're a fool." He left her there and went back to find Eliza, who was standing exactly where he'd left her, now surrounded by a small cluster of younger women who looked like they were circling prey. "Is it true your father was a confectioner?" one of them was asking, her voice syrupy sweet. "Yes," Eliza said evenly. "How charming. And you work in the shop yourself?" "I own it." "Oh, how industrious." The woman exchanged glances with her companions. "I'm sure the Duke finds that terribly refreshing. After all, most of us hardly know what work means." Adrian arrived just as Eliza opened her mouth to respond. "Ladies," he said smoothly, taking Eliza's elbow, "if you'll excuse us." They walked out together, and it wasn't until they were in the carriage that Eliza finally sagged against the seat. "That was horrible," she said. "I know. Your mother hates me. She doesn't know you yet." Eliza laughed, bitter and tired. "She doesn't want to know me. None of them do." She turned to look at him. "Did you see how they looked at me? Like I was something disgusting they'd stepped in." "They'll come around." "No, they won't. And you know what the worst part is? I don't even blame them." She rubbed her face. "I don't belong in that world, Adrian. I don't know the rules. I don't know how to walk or talk or which fork to use for which course. I'm going to embarrass you." "You could never embarrass me." "I already have. You saw their faces." Adrian reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. "Listen to me. I don't care what they think. I don't care if every person in that ballroom cuts me dead tomorrow. The only thing I care about is you." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "That's easy to say now. But what about in a year, 5 years? When you've lost all your friends and your mother won't speak to you and everyone you meet treats you like you've made a terrible mistake?" "Then I'll still have you," Adrian said simply. and that will be enough. She wanted to believe him. He could see it in her face, but the fear was there too, sharp and cold. I hope you're right, she whispered. Adrian hoped so too. Bet. The next morning brought the consequences. Adrian woke to find 3 letters on his breakfast tray, all bearing the wax seals of prominent families. He opened them one by one, and each was a variation of the same message. Polite regrets, prior commitments, sudden illnesses preventing attendance at his wedding. His secretary appeared in the doorway, looking pale. Your Grace, Lord Pemberton's office sent word. The shipping contract negotiations have been postponed indefinitely. Adrian set down his coffee. Postponed or canceled? The letter said postponed, but the tone suggested. The secretary cleared his throat. They mentioned concerns about stability and reputation. I see. There's also been talk in the clubs, nothing official, but say it. Some of the younger lords are taking bets on how long the engagement will last. The secretary looked miserable. I'm sorry, Your Grace. Adrian dismissed him and sat alone at the table, looking at the letters. He'd expected pushback, but this was faster and more coordinated than he'd anticipated. Someone was organizing this, someone with influence. He found out who later that afternoon when his solicitor arrived, looking grim. Your uncle has been visiting people, the solicitor said. Lord Horace. He's telling anyone who'll listen that you've had a mental collapse, that this engagement is proof you're not fit to manage the duchy. Adrian's hands clenched. Horace has no claim. He's your heir until you produce children, and he's making a case that your judgment has been compromised. The solicitor pulled out a document. He's also been looking into the entailment, seeing if there's any way to challenge your authority. There isn't. Not legally, no, but he doesn't need to win in court. He just needs to make enough people doubt you. The solicitor leaned forward. Your Grace, I've known you since you were a boy, and I've never questioned your decisions. But I have to ask, are you certain about this? Because once you marry her, there's no going back. Your uncle will use it against you forever. Adrian thought about Eliza, standing in that ballroom with her head high despite the whispers. About the way she'd looked at him in the carriage, terrified but trying not to show it. I'm certain, he said. The solicitor sighed. Then we'd better prepare for a fight. Eliza heard about the betting pools from Margaret, who heard it from the butcher's boy, who heard it from his cousin, who worked at a gentleman's club. They're saying you'll break it off within a month, Margaret reported, kneading bread dough with more force than necessary. That you'll realize you can't handle society and run back here with your tail between your legs. Eliza slammed a jar down on the counter, harder than she meant to. Bastards! Eliza! Well, they are. She started measuring sugar with sharp, angry movements. They don't even know me, and they've already decided I'm going to fail. Margaret watched her for a moment. Are you? Going to fail, I mean. I don't know. Eliza's hands stilled. I went to that ball, and I felt like an animal in a zoo. Everyone staring, no one talking to me directly, just whispering behind their fans. She looked at her sister. How am I supposed to survive in that world? The same way you survived father dying and mother following him and keeping this shop running when the landlord tried to triple our rent, Margaret said firmly. You're tougher than you think. This is different. How? Because, Eliza struggled for words. Because when I failed at those things, I only hurt myself. If I fail at this, I hurt Adrian too. I ruin his reputation, his standing, maybe his whole life, and I don't know if I can live with that. Margaret came around the counter and took her sister's hands. Do you love him? Yes. Does he love you? He says he does. Then that's all that matters. Eliza wanted to believe that. But that afternoon, when a customer came in and very deliberately left without buying anything, whispering to her companion about that woman who thinks she can marry above her station, Eliza felt the first real cracks in her resolve. She told Adrian about it that evening when he visited the shop. They're turning on me, she said. The regular customers. Mrs. Hendricks has been coming here for 5 years, and today she walked past without even looking at me. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then she's not worth your time. She was worth my time last week. So was Mr. Pelham, and the widow Crenshaw, and half a dozen others. Eliza gestured helplessly. I'm losing business because of this engagement. I'll make up the difference. I don't want your money. The words came out sharper than she intended. I want my life back. The one where I was just Eliza who ran the sweet shop, not Eliza who's trying to claw her way into the aristocracy. That's not what you're doing. That's what everyone thinks I'm doing. She slumped against the counter. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should just... Don't, Adrian said quietly. Don't say you should end this, please. Eliza looked at him and saw the fear in his eyes, raw and undisguised. It mirrored her own. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. What if we're making a mistake? Then we'll make it together. He reached for her hand. I know this is hard. I know it's only going to get harder. But I also know that I would rather face all of it with you than face an easy life without you. Eliza closed her eyes. You're too good at saying the right thing. I mean it. I know you do. That's what makes this so terrifying. They stood there in the quiet shop, holding hands across the counter, and Eliza tried to imagine their future, tried to see past the scandal and the whispers and the betting pools to something resembling happiness. She couldn't quite manage it. The breaking point came 2 weeks before the wedding. Adrian had arranged for Eliza to meet with a tutor, a kind older woman named Mrs. Ashworth, who specialized in teaching social graces to newly wealthy merchants' wives. The idea was that Eliza could learn the basic rules of etiquette, enough to navigate society without constant fear of making a mistake. The first lesson was a disaster. You're holding the teacup wrong, Mrs. Ashworth said gently. Pinky down, dear. Eliza adjusted her grip, and when you're introduced to a duchess, you curtsy lower than you would for a countess. How much lower? It depends on the duchess, Mrs. Ashworth demonstrated. And you must never speak unless spoken to first. Never? Not in formal settings, no. Eliza set down the teacup. This is ridiculous. I understand it seems arbitrary, but these rules exist for a reason. What reason? To make people feel small? Eliza stood up. I'm not doing this. Miss Hartwell, please. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life measuring my curtsies and keeping my mouth shut because someone decided that's how proper ladies behave. She grabbed her shawl. Tell Adrian I've gone home. She made it halfway down the street before Adrian caught up with her. Eliza, wait. I can't do this. She spun to face him. I can't learn 1,000 meaningless rules and pretend they matter. I can't smile at people who hate me and curtsy to women who think I'm dirt. I can't... Her voice broke. I can't be what you need me to be. Adrian caught her shoulders gently. I need you to be you, that's all. But me isn't good enough for your world. Then my world can go to hell. Eliza laughed despite the tears on her face. You say that now. I'll say it forever. He pulled her close. Listen to me. I don't care if you use the wrong fork or curtsy at the wrong angle. I don't care if you tell some pompous earl exactly what you think of him. I fell in love with you because you're honest and brave, and you don't pretend to be anything you're not. If I wanted a perfect duchess, I'd have married one of the vapid girls my mother keeps throwing at me. They might have been less trouble. They'd have been unbearably boring. Eliza rested her forehead against his chest. I'm going to embarrass you. Probably. Your friends will hate me. Most of them are insufferable anyway. Adrian, marry me, he said. Not because you've learned the rules or because you think you can fit into society. Marry me because you want to. Because you love me despite what a disaster this is going to be. Because you're willing to fight for us. Eliza pulled back to look at him. His hair was disheveled from running after her, his cravat crooked, and there was something desperate and entirely un-Duke-like in his expression. You really mean it, she said wonderingly. You'd give up everything. I'd give up anything except you. She kissed him there on the street, not caring who saw, not caring what they'd say about it later. When they broke apart, she was still crying, but she was smiling too. Okay, she said. Okay, yes, I'll marry you. Even though it's going to be a disaster? Especially because it's going to be a disaster. She wiped her eyes. But I'm not learning to curtsy. Adrian grinned. Fair enough. They were 3 steps from his carriage when a man stepped out of the shadows. How touching, Lord Horace Blackthorne said, his voice dripping with false warmth. My nephew and his little shop girl. Adrian went very still. Uncle, I've been looking for you. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, I think you do. Horace's smile didn't reach his eyes. You see, I've been speaking with the family solicitors. and several members of Parliament, and a number of your business associates, and they all share my concerns about your recent behavior. My private life is none of your concern. It is when it affects the duchy. Horace pulled out a folded paper. This is a petition signed by 12 members of your own family, requesting a formal inquiry into your fitness to hold the title. Eliza felt Adrian's hand tighten on hers. You can't remove me, Adrian said, his voice dangerously quiet. I don't have to remove you. I just have to make it impossible for you to function. Imagine trying to run the duchy when no one will do business with you, when every banker, every merchant, every political ally has been convinced you've lost your senses. Horace's smile widened. Of course there is a solution. Which is? End this absurd engagement. Marry someone appropriate. Restore the family's good name. Horace glanced at Eliza with barely concealed contempt. I'm sure Miss Hartwell will understand. After all, she seems like a practical woman. Eliza had never wanted to hit someone so badly in her life. Adrian stepped forward, putting himself between her and Horace. Get out of my way. Think about what you're throwing away, Adrian. Your position, your influence, your legacy. And for what? A woman who can't even hold a teacup properly? I said get out of my way. Horace held up his hands in mock surrender. As you wish. But know this, if you go through with this wedding, you'll be fighting me every step of the way. Every business deal, every political vote, every social gathering. I'll make sure you regret choosing her. He walked away, leaving them standing in the street. Eliza was shaking. Adrian, he's bluffing. What if he's not? Adrian turned to face her, and the fury in his eyes was matched only by his determination. Then we fight him. We fight all of them, together. He'll destroy you. He'll try. Adrian cupped her face in his hands. But I'm not giving you up. Not for him. Not for anyone. Eliza wanted to tell him to reconsider, to think about what he was losing. But looking at him now, angry and determined and utterly, impossibly stubborn, she realized something. He'd already made his choice, and so had she. 2 weeks, she said. What? 2 weeks until the wedding. We've got 2 weeks to prepare for war. She straightened her spine. So let's make sure we're ready. Adrian's expression shifted from surprise to something that looked almost like pride. You're serious? Your uncle wants a fight? We'll give him one. She took his hand. But we do it smart. We find allies. We shore up your business relationships. We make it as hard as possible for him to undermine you. How? I don't know yet. But I know people. I know how to negotiate with landlords who hate me and suppliers who try to cheat me. I know how to survive. She met his eyes. And I'm not going to let some pompous lord destroy what we have without a fight. For the first time since Horace had appeared, Adrian smiled. Have I mentioned that I love you? Not in the last 5 minutes. I love you. Good, Eliza said, because you're stuck with me now. They climbed into the carriage, and as it pulled away, Eliza looked back at the street where Horace had confronted them. She felt the fear still there, cold and heavy in her stomach. But underneath it was something else, anger and determination. If Adrian's family wanted war, she'd give them one they'd never forget. The war started quietly, with numbers. Adrian's banker, Mr. Whitmore, arrived at the house 3 days after the confrontation with Horace. He was a thin man with wire spectacles and the permanent stoop of someone who'd spent 40 years hunched over ledgers. Your Grace, he said, settling into the chair across from Adrian's desk. We need to discuss your accounts. Adrian looked up from the correspondence he'd been reviewing. What about them? Several of your investments have been withdrawn. Lord Pembridge pulled out of the shipping venture. The Thornbury Consortium dissolved their partnership. Whitmore removed his spectacles and cleaned them nervously. And there are rumors that your credit lines may be restricted. By whom? I can't say for certain, but Whitmore hesitated. Your uncle has been making inquiries, asking questions about the duchy's financial stability, suggesting that perhaps your judgment has been compromised. Adrian set down his pen very carefully. How bad is it? Not catastrophic. Yet. But if this continues, if more investors pull out or lenders refuse to extend credit, Whitmore replaced his spectacles. The duchy can survive, but it will be uncomfortable. You'll have to liquidate some assets, possibly sell off properties, and any new ventures will be difficult to fund. What do you recommend? Honestly, Whitmore looked uncomfortable. End the engagement. Marry someone acceptable. Wait a year or two, then quietly pension off the girl.
Her name is Eliza, and that's not an option.
Whitmore sighed. Then you're going to have to fight for every penny. And your Grace? I'm not sure you understand how many people are willing to side with your uncle on this. After Whitmore left, Adrian sat alone in his study and did the calculations. Without the Pembridge shipping deal, he'd lose roughly £15,000 a year. The Thornberry partnership had been worth another 10. If the credit lines were cut, he'd have to use his own capital for expansion, which meant slower growth and fewer opportunities. None of it was fatal, but all of it was calculated to hurt. Eliza found him there an hour later, staring at columns of numbers. How bad? She asked. Bad enough. He told her about the withdrawn investments and the threatened credit lines. She listened without interrupting, then sat down across from him. What can we do? We? You think I'm going to sit in the shop wrapping candy while your uncle tries to destroy you? She leaned forward. I've been running a business for 2 years. I know how to deal with people trying to squeeze you out. This isn't the same, isn't it? Her eyes were sharp. Someone with more power is trying to force you into submission by cutting off your resources. That's exactly what my landlord did when he wanted me gone. He raised the rent, made repairs I was responsible for, turned other shopkeepers against me. She smiled grimly. I'm still here. How? I found other suppliers, built relationships with customers he couldn't touch, made myself too valuable to easily replace. She tapped the ledger. Your uncle is counting on your business partners being loyal to him, or at least afraid of him, so we find the ones who aren't. Adrian studied her. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about nothing else. She pulled out a folded paper from her pocket. I made a list. People you do business with who might not care about society's opinion, merchants who've made their own way, bankers who value profit over pedigree, even a few minor nobles who have reason to hate your uncle. Adrian unfolded the paper and scanned it. The names were surprisingly thorough. She must have been asking questions, gathering information. Where did you get all this? Margaret's friend works for a law firm, and the butcher's cousin is a clerk at Lloyd's, and I may have asked your secretary a few questions. She shrugged. People talk to shopkeepers. We're invisible until we're useful. Adrian looked at the list again, seeing possibilities he hadn't considered. A textile merchant who'd been blackballed by the aristocracy for being too aggressive. A banker known for taking risks other institutions wouldn't touch. A Scottish lord who'd publicly feuded with Horace 5 years ago over a bad horse trade. This might work, he said slowly. It has to work. Eliza's voice was firm. Because I'm not letting your uncle win. And I'm not letting you lose everything because of me. It's not because of you. Yes, it is. And that's fine. But it means I have to help fix it. She stood up. So tomorrow we start making visits. Together. Eliza, these aren't people you can just... I'm not asking permission, Adrian. I'm telling you what we're doing. She softened slightly. You said we'd fight together, so let me fight. Adrian wanted to argue, to protect her from the ugliness that was coming, but looking at her now, determined and fierce and absolutely unwilling to back down, he realized she was right. They were in this together. Tomorrow then, he said. She kissed him quickly and left, and Adrian returned to the ledger with a feeling that was almost hope. Their first visit was to Samuel Wright, the textile merchant. Wright had built an empire importing cotton and silk, but his methods were considered too ruthless by the established trading houses. He'd undercut competitors, bribed port officials, and generally behaved like someone who didn't care about making friends. The aristocracy considered him vulgar, which made him perfect. Wright received them in his office near the docks, a space that smelled of salt and tobacco, with ledgers stacked on every surface. Lord Blackthorne, he said, not rising from his chair. Heard you were getting married. Also heard your family doesn't approve. Word travels fast, Adrian said. It does when people are placing bets on whether you'll go through with it. Wright's eyes shifted to Eliza. This the bride? Miss Eliza Hartwell, Adrian said. My fiancée. Wright studied her for a long moment. You know what you're getting into, girl? Better than most people think, Eliza said evenly. Wright gestured at the chairs across from his desk. Sit. Tell me why you're here. Adrian laid out the situation. The withdrawn investments, The pressure from Horace, the need for new business partners who wouldn't cave to social pressure. Wright listened without expression, then leaned back in his chair. What's in it for me? Exclusive contracts on duchy lands, priority access to our warehouses, and a partnership that won't disappear the moment someone whispers in the right ear. Your uncle will make trouble. He's already making trouble, Eliza cut in. The question is whether you're the kind of man who backs down when threatened, or the kind who sees an opportunity. Wright's eyebrows rose. You've got nerve, I'll give you that. I've got a shop to run and a wedding to plan and no patience for games, Eliza said. So yes or no, Mr. Wright, can we do business? Wright laughed, a rough barking sound. I like her. She's got more spine than half the lords I deal with. He pulled out a contract template. All right, let's talk terms. They spent 2 hours hammering out details, with Eliza surprising Adrian by negotiating as fiercely as Wright himself. She knew fabric costs, shipping rates, seasonal fluctuations. She'd clearly done her homework. When they finally left, Wright shook Adrian's hand and said, You're either very brave or very stupid marrying her. But I respect it. Which do you think I am? Adrian asked. Wright glanced at Eliza, who was already heading for the carriage. Both, probably, but mostly brave. The second visit went less smoothly. James Cartwright was a banker, known for risky ventures and high returns. He'd made fortunes for clients willing to trust him, but he had the morals of a street rat, and everyone knew it. He received them in a lavish office that screamed new money, gilded furniture, expensive art poorly displayed, wine that cost more than it tasted. Lord Blackthorne, he said, all oily charm. What an unexpected pleasure. Adrian explained what he needed. Cartwright listened, nodding occasionally, his fingers steepled under his chin. I see, he said when Adrian finished. And what collateral are you offering? The duchy's assets are currently under scrutiny by your uncle, who's suggesting you're not mentally sound enough to manage them. Cartwright's smile never wavered. I need something more concrete. What did you have in mind? Cartwright's eyes slid to Eliza. I've heard your fiancé owns a shop. Perhaps that could serve as additional security. Adrian felt Eliza stiffen beside him. The shop isn't part of this negotiation. Isn't it? You're asking me to take a risk on you, Lord Blackthorne. I need assurance that you're committed to repayment. And what better assurance than something your future wife values? The shop is off the table, Eliza said flatly. Cartwright's smile widened. Then I'm afraid we don't have a deal. They left empty-handed, and in the carriage, Eliza was shaking with anger. That bastard, she hissed. He wasn't even pretending to negotiate in good faith. He just wanted to see if he could take the shop. We'll find someone else, Adrian said. Will we? Because it seems like everyone either hates you for defying your uncle or sees us as easy targets. She pressed her palms against her eyes. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I'm making things worse. You're not... I cost you the Pembridge deal. I cost you your family's support. And now I'm sitting in meetings with men who look at me like I'm something to be bought or sold. Her voice cracked. How is any of this worth it? Adrian took her hands, pulling them away from her face. Because I love you. Because you make me feel like a person instead of a title. Because every moment I spend with you is worth 1,000 meetings with men like Cartwright. That's not a business strategy, Adrian. No, but it's the truth. He kissed her forehead. We'll find another way. We always do. Eliza leaned against him, and they rode the rest of the way in silence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Margaret appeared at Adrian's house 2 days later, breathless and excited. There's a woman, she said without preamble. Lady Thornfield. She heard about what you're doing, and she wants to meet. Adrian frowned. Thornfield? I don't know that name. She's a widow. Her husband died 10 years ago and left her a fortune. She invests in businesses, quietly, because society doesn't approve of women doing commerce. Margaret grinned. But she doesn't care what society thinks. Sound familiar? The meeting was arranged for the next afternoon at Lady Thornfield's townhouse. She was a woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. So, she said, once they were seated in her drawing room, you're the Duke who's marrying beneath his station. I'm marrying the woman I love, Adrian corrected. Same thing, according to most people. Lady Thornfield turned to Eliza. And you're the shopkeeper willing to walk into the lion's den. I don't have much choice, Eliza said. The lions came for me first.
Lady Thornfield smiled. I like you. You don't simper or apologize. She poured tea with steady hands. I'm going to be blunt, Lord Blackthorne. Your uncle is a vindictive little weasel who's been making life difficult for anyone who doesn't bow to him. I've hated him for years. So when I heard he was trying to destroy you, I thought, here's an opportunity. To invest? Adrian asked.
To cause him trouble while making money. I'm a businesswoman, not a charity. She slid a folder across the table. I've been reviewing your finances. You've made some mistakes. The Pembridge deal was overvalued, and you're overextended in shipping. But overall, you're sound. With proper backing, you could weather this storm and come out stronger. Adrian opened the folder. The numbers were detailed, thorough, and surprisingly generous. What's the catch? He asked. No catch. I put up capital, you execute your business plan, we split the profits. Standard arrangement. Lady Thornfield leaned back. But I'm not doing this quietly. I want everyone to know I'm backing you. I want your uncle to see that not everyone is afraid of him. That will make you a target, Eliza said. My dear, I've been a target since I refused to remarry and retire to the countryside like a proper widow. I'm quite used to it. Lady Thornfield's smile was sharp. Besides, I have more money than most of them combined. They can whisper all they want. It won't change my bank balance. They finalized the arrangement over the next 2 hours. By the time they left, Adrian had secured enough capital to replace everything Horace had taken away, and then some. She's terrifying, Eliza said in the carriage. She's perfect, Adrian corrected, and she's on our side. For the first time in weeks, Eliza smiled. Maybe we can actually do this. We will do this. But the relief lasted less than a day. The scandal broke in the morning papers. Adrian was at breakfast when his secretary brought in the Times, his face pale. Your Grace, you need to see this. The headline was brutal. Duke's folly, Blackthorne to wed shopkeeper of questionable virtue. Adrian's blood went cold as he read the article. It claimed Eliza had been involved with multiple men before him, that she'd used her position to seduce wealthy customers, that the shop was failing and she was marrying him for money. Every word was a lie. Every word would be believed. Where did this come from? Adrian demanded. Anonymous source, according to the paper. But the details... The secretary looked sick. Someone had to have been investigating her, following her. This isn't just rumor. Adrian was already moving, grabbing his coat. I need to get to Eliza. He found her at the shop, surrounded by customers who'd come not to buy, but to stare and whisper. The moment he walked in, the room went silent. Eliza was behind the counter, her face white but her spine straight. Everyone out, Adrian said quietly. No one moved. I said out. His voice was cold enough to freeze. Now! They left, slowly, reluctantly, still whispering. When the last one was gone, Adrian locked the door. Eliza hadn't moved. You saw the paper? Yes. It's lies, all of it. I know, but people will believe it anyway. Her voice was hollow. They want to believe it. It confirms everything they already thought about me. Adrian came around the counter and took her hands. We'll issue a retraction, sue them for libel, make them print the truth. It won't matter. The damage is done. She pulled away. Adrian, this is what I was afraid of. This is what happens when someone like me tries to enter your world. They destroy you. They destroy us both if we let them. How do we stop this? She gestured at the empty shop. Half of London will have read that article by now. The other half will read it by tomorrow. And every word makes me sound like a liar and a fortune hunter, Adrian finished grimly. I know. That's the point. Then what do we do? Before Adrian could answer, the door rattled. Someone was pounding on it. Eliza, open up! Margaret's voice panicked. Adrian unlocked the door and Margaret stumbled in, holding a letter. This just came. Hand-delivered. Eliza opened it. The blood drained from her face. What is it? Adrian asked. She handed it to him wordlessly. The letter was short and unsigned. End the engagement by week's end, or the next article will be worse. We have witnesses prepared to testify to your indiscretions. We have documents. Walk away now, and we'll leave you alone. Refuse, and we'll destroy what little reputation you have left. Adrian crumpled the letter.
Horace. We don't know that, Margaret said. Who else would it be? Adrian started pacing. He tried money. He tried social pressure. Now he's trying blackmail.
Blackmail only works if there's something to find, Eliza said quietly. And there isn't. I know. Adrian stopped in front of her. But that doesn't matter. They'll manufacture evidence, pay people to lie, create documents that look real enough to convince a court. So what do we do? Margaret asked.
Adrian looked at Eliza, at the fear and anger and exhaustion in her eyes. She'd been fighting for weeks, dealing with social humiliation and business pressure and now outright character assassination. And she was still standing, but for how much longer? We call his bluff, Adrian said. How? Eliza asked. We get married, today. Both women stared at him. Today? Margaret repeated. Right now, before he can publish another article or manufacture more evidence. We get married, and then it doesn't matter what he says. Adrian turned to Eliza. Once you're my wife, you're a duchess. They can whisper all they want, but they can't touch you. Not legally, not socially. Adrian, we can't just... There are bans to post, arrangements to make, special license. I can get one within the hour. We find a church, we say our vows, and it's done. He took her hands. I know this isn't the wedding you imagined, but if we wait, Horace will keep escalating. He'll keep hurting you until you break or I give in. And I am not giving in. Eliza looked at Margaret, who shrugged helplessly, then back at Adrian. You're serious, she said, completely. We'd have no guests, no celebration, nothing. We'd have each other. That's all that matters. Eliza closed her eyes, and Adrian could see her weighing the options. The safe choice would be to wait, to try to fight the scandal properly. But the safe choice had never worked for either of them. Okay, she said finally. Okay, let's do it. The license took 3 hours to acquire, even with Adrian pulling every string he had. By the time they reached the small church in Cheapside, it was nearly evening. The vicar was an old man who'd known Adrian's father. He didn't ask questions when Adrian explained the situation, just nodded and prepared the chapel. Margaret stood as witness, along with Adrian's secretary, who'd been sworn to secrecy. There were no flowers, no music, no elaborate ceremony, just two people in a dim chapel, promising themselves to each other. Eliza's voice shook when she said her vows. Adrian's hand trembled when he slipped the ring on her finger. But when the vicar pronounced them married, when Adrian kissed her in that quiet chapel, Eliza felt something settle in her chest. They'd done it. Against everything, against his family and society, and all the forces trying to tear them apart, they'd done it. We should go, Margaret whispered, before anyone finds out. They were halfway to the door when it burst open. Lord Horace Blackthorne stood there, flanked by two men Adrian didn't recognize. His face was purple with rage. Stop them, Horace snarled. The ceremony is complete, the vicar said, confused. They're legally married, under false pretenses. Horace pulled out a document. I have testimony that this woman has been coerced, that Lord Blackthorne is not of sound mind to make such a decision. You're here to make a scene, Adrian cut in, his voice ice cold. And you're too late. She's my wife now, the Duchess of Ashford, and there's nothing you can do about it. Horace's hands clenched on the document. This isn't over. Yes, Adrian said quietly. It is. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Horace turned and left, slamming the door behind him. Eliza realized she'd been holding her breath. Is he gone? Margaret whispered. For now, Adrian said. But the tension in his shoulders suggested he knew better. They left through a side door, climbing into an unmarked carriage Adrian had arranged. As they pulled away from the church, Eliza looked down at the ring on her finger. Simple gold, hastily purchased, worth more than anything she'd ever owned. We did it, she said, half to herself. We did, Adrian agreed. Your uncle looked like he wanted to kill us. He probably does. Eliza should have been frightened. She should have been worried about what came next. But sitting in that carriage with her new husband, she felt something else entirely. Defiance. Let him try, she said. Adrian looked at her, surprised, then smiled. That's my Duchess. But as the carriage rounded the corner, Eliza saw a familiar figure standing in the shadows. One of the men who'd been with Horace. He was watching them, and when he saw Eliza looking, he didn't look away. He smiled.
And Eliza felt ice flood her veins because she recognized that smile. She'd seen it before on men who thought they had power over her, men who thought they could take what they wanted. The carriage pulled away, and the man disappeared into the darkness. But Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, not even close. The man's name was Thomas Graves, and Adrian's investigator found him within 2 days. He's a professional witness, the investigator said, spreading documents across Adrian's desk. Testifies in court cases for whoever pays him, usually debt disputes or property claims. But he's been known to provide creative testimony when the price is right. Adrian studied the records. Graves had testified in 17 cases over the past 5 years, always as a credible witness to events that conveniently supported his employer's position. He'd never been caught perjuring himself, but the pattern was unmistakable. Horace hired him, Adrian said. Almost certainly, and if he hired Graves, he's probably hired others. The investigator tapped another file. I found 2 more men with similar histories. Both were seen entering your uncle's residence last week. Eliza appeared in the doorway, still wearing the simple dress she'd married in. They'd spent their wedding night in Adrian's townhouse, barely sleeping, both of them waiting for the next attack. "What did you find?" she asked. Adrian showed her the files. Her expression hardened as she read. "They're building a case," she said. "False witnesses to claim I was, what, a mistress to half of London?" Something like that. Adrian's jaw tightened. But false testimony only works if no one challenges it. So we challenge it. We find out who else Horace has paid off, we document their histories, and we expose them before they can testify. That could take weeks. We don't have weeks. The morning papers had already reported the hasty marriage, with speculation about why it had happened so quickly. The betting pools had shifted from whether they'd marry to how long it would last. Horace will move fast now. He knows the marriage changes things, so he'll try to annul it or discredit it before we can solidify our position. On what grounds? Coercion, insanity, fraud, take your pick. Adrian stood up and started pacing. The law gives him options if he can prove I wasn't of sound mind or that you married me under false pretenses. And with enough paid witnesses, he might convince a judge to at least hear the case. Eliza sank into a chair. So we're right back where we started, fighting the same battle, just with different weapons. Not exactly. Adrian stopped pacing and looked at her. Because now you're a duchess. That changes the game. How? Because attacking you means attacking the duchy itself. Horace can claim I'm mad or you're a fortune hunter, but he can't undo the marriage without proving it in court. And courts move slowly, which gives us time. Time for what? To make you untouchable. Adrian pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. We need to make you so visible, so publicly established as my wife, that trying to remove you becomes politically impossible. We need allies, events, public appearances. We need to force society to accept you before Horace can convince them to reject you. They already reject me, Eliza said quietly. Some do, but not all. Lady Thornfield doesn't. Samuel Wright doesn't. And there are others, people who don't care about pedigree or who hate Horace enough to support us just to spite him. Adrian sat down across from her. We've been playing defense. It's time to attack. Eliza met his eyes, and he saw the exhaustion there, but underneath it was something else. The same stubborn defiance that had made her stand in that ballroom, head high, while everyone whispered. All right, she said. Tell me what to do. The first public appearance was a charity auction at Lady Thornfield's estate. Half of London will be there, Lady Thornfield said when she extended the invitation, and the other half will read about it in the papers. You need to come, both of you. Show them you're not hiding. Eliza spent 2 days preparing, with Lady Thornfield's personal dressmaker creating a gown that was elegant without being ostentatious. Margaret helped with her hair, pinning it up in a style that looked effortless, but had taken an hour to perfect. You look like a duchess, Margaret said, stepping back to admire her work. I feel like I'm wearing a costume, Eliza muttered, adjusting the neckline. That's because you are. But so is everyone else at these things. Margaret handed her gloves. The difference is, they've been wearing their costumes longer. Adrian arrived to collect her, dressed in formal evening wear that made him look every inch the Duke. He stopped when he saw her. What? Eliza asked, suddenly self-conscious. Nothing. You're beautiful.
I'm nervous. So am I. He offered his arm. But we'll do this together. The auction was held in Lady Thornfield's massive ballroom, filled with London's elite, and those wealthy enough to pretend they belonged. Eliza felt every eye turn toward them when they entered. The whispers started immediately. That's her? The shopkeeper? I heard she trapped him. Adrian's hand tightened on hers, but his expression remained neutral. They made their way through the crowd, and Eliza focused on breathing steadily, on not looking as terrified as she felt. Lady Thornfield materialized beside them. Lord and Lady Blackthorne, she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. I'm so glad you could come. The use of Eliza's title was deliberate, a reminder to everyone present that this wasn't just Adrian's mistress or some social climber. This was the Duchess of Ashford, whether they liked it or not. Thank you for having us, Eliza managed. Come, I want to introduce you to some people. Lady Thornfield led them toward a group near the windows. Lord and Lady Blackthorne, may I present Mr. and Mrs. Ashby. They own half the textile mills in Manchester. Mr. Ashby was a broad man with calloused hands and an accent that marked him as northern. His wife was sharp-eyed and dressed in silk that was expensive but not fashionable. Heard about your marriage, Ashby said bluntly. Caused quite a stir. So I understand, Adrian said carefully. Good. Ashby grinned. About time someone shook things up around here. These London peacocks need reminding that money doesn't care where it comes from. He turned to Eliza. My wife started as a seamstress. Worked her way up to owning her own shop before we met. Best business decision I ever made was marrying her. Mrs. Ashby smiled. He means the best personal decision. That too. Ashby clapped Adrian on the shoulder. You did right, Your Grace. Don't let anyone tell you different. It was the first genuinely kind thing anyone outside their small circle had said in weeks. Eliza felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. They spent the next hour being introduced to similar couples, merchants who'd bought their way into society, minor nobles who valued competence over breeding, a Scottish baroness who'd married an English earl against everyone's advice and seemed delighted to meet someone else who'd done the same. See? Lady Thornfield murmured at one point. You have more allies than you think. They've just been waiting to see if you'd actually go through with it. But not everyone was friendly. Lord Pembridge cut them dead, turning his back when Adrian tried to greet him. Several ladies whispered behind their fans, their expressions making clear what they thought of Eliza. And standing near the refreshment table, watching with cold eyes, was Lord Horace. He's here, Eliza said quietly. I see him. Adrian's voice was tight. Ignore him. He's looking for a reaction. But Horace didn't stay ignored. He approached as the auction was beginning, his smile venomous. Nephew, he said, and the new Duchess. How quaint. Horace. Adrian's tone was ice. I wanted to offer my congratulations. So rare to see true love triumph over good sense. Horace's eyes slid to Eliza. Tell me, my dear, how does it feel to have achieved such an impressive rise in station? About the same as it felt yesterday, Eliza said evenly. Except now I have to deal with relatives I didn't ask for. Someone nearby choked on their champagne. Horace's smile froze. Careful, girl. You may have married a title, but you haven't earned respect. Respect is earned by how you treat people, not by what your grandfather did. Eliza met his eyes. Which means you're starting from a deficit. The color rose in Horace's face. You forget yourself. No, I think you forget yourself. Adrian stepped forward, putting himself slightly between Eliza and his uncle. My wife has shown more grace in the face of your attacks than you've shown in your entire life. Now, if you'll excuse us, the auction is starting. They walked away, leaving Horace sputtering. Eliza's heart was hammering, but she kept her expression calm until they'd reached the other side of the room. That was dangerous, Adrian murmured. He was being an ass. He's always an ass, but publicly insulting him felt amazing. Eliza smiled tightly. And everyone heard it, which means they know I'm not going to roll over and take whatever abuse he wants to dish out. Adrian studied her, then laughed quietly. You're enjoying this. I'm terrified, but yes, also enjoying it. She glanced around the room. These people have been treating me like I'm invisible or beneath them. It's nice to remind them I have teeth. The auction proceeded, and Adrian bid aggressively on several items, more than was strictly necessary, but enough to show that the duchy's finances weren't in trouble despite the rumors. When a painting of a London street scene came up, he bid 3 times its value and won it. "For you," he said to Eliza. "For the shop, if you want it." She looked at the painting, a simple scene of a confectionery not unlike hers, with people bustling past. It was the first time since they'd married that Adrian had acknowledged her old life as something worth preserving. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. By the end of the evening, they'd made more connections than Eliza had thought possible. Not everyone was friendly, but enough were, and more importantly, they'd shown that they weren't hiding, weren't ashamed, weren't going to disappear just because society wanted them to. In the carriage home, Eliza leaned against Adrian's shoulder. "That wasn't as terrible as I thought it would be," she said. "No, it was progress." He kissed the top of her head. "But it's only the beginning." What? The next attack came through the courts. Adrian's solicitor arrived 3 days after the auction, looking grim. "Your uncle has filed a petition. He's claiming the marriage is invalid due to undue influence and requesting an annulment." "On what evidence?" Adrian demanded. "The testimony of 3 witnesses who claim you were acting irrationally in the weeks before the wedding, and a statement from a physician who says he examined you last month and found signs of mental instability." "I was never examined by any physician. The doctor's signature looks legitimate, and the witnesses have submitted sworn statements." The solicitor spread the documents across the desk. "This is more coordinated than I expected. Horace must have been planning this for weeks." Eliza read over Adrian's shoulder. The statements were detailed, specific. One claimed Adrian had been drinking heavily. Another said he'd been making erratic business decisions. The third described him raving about his love for a common shopkeeper in a manner suggesting obsession rather than affection. All lies, all convincing. "What do we do?" she asked. "We fight it in court, bring our own witnesses, prove the marriage was consensual and that Adrian was of sound mind." The solicitor looked troubled. "But Your Grace, this is going to be public. Every detail will be examined. Every aspect of your courtship will be scrutinized, and the newspapers will report every salacious detail." "So we give them something else to talk about," Eliza said. Both men looked at her. "What do you mean?" Adrian asked. "We turn this into a public relations battle instead of just a legal one. We don't just defend ourselves in court. We defend ourselves in the papers, in society, everywhere Horace is trying to attack us." She started pacing. "He's using public opinion to pressure the court, so we do the same thing but better." "How?" "We tell our story. Not the version Horace is spinning, but the truth. We find a sympathetic journalist, give them an interview, let people see that we're not some scandalous disaster, but 2 people who fell in love despite the obstacles." Eliza turned to face them. "Right now, the only narrative out there is the one Horace is creating. We need to create our own." Adrian's solicitor looked skeptical. "That's risky. Anything you say can be used against you." "Everything we're already doing is being used against us," Eliza countered. "At least this way we control part of the message." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Do it. Find a journalist who'll write a fair story." It took a week to arrange, but they finally found someone. A young writer named Peter Halsworth who worked for a smaller paper and had a reputation for actual journalism instead of gossip. He met them at the townhouse, nervous but eager. "I want to be clear," he said. "I'm not going to write puff pieces. If you tell me your story, I'll write what I hear. The truth, good or bad." "That's all we're asking," Adrian said. They spent 3 hours talking. Adrian explained how they'd met, how Eliza had treated him like a regular customer instead of a duke. Eliza described her initial frustration with him, how she'd had no idea who he was and didn't care once she found out. They talked about the pressure from his family, the decision to marry despite it, the attacks they'd faced since. Halsworth took notes furiously, asking pointed questions. "Why did you marry so quickly?" he asked. "Because waiting gave our enemies time to destroy us before we could commit to each other," Adrian said bluntly. "And because I was tired of letting other people dictate how I should live my life." "Lady Blackthorne, there are rumors that you married him for his money. How do you respond to that?" Eliza looked him straight in the eye. "I had a business that was keeping me fed and housed. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Marrying Adrian meant giving up my independence, my privacy, and my peace of mind. So no, I didn't marry him for money. I married him because I loved him enough to think all of that was worth it." When Halsworth left, Eliza felt drained. Did we make a mistake? We'll find out when the article runs, Adrian said. The article appeared 2 days later, taking up half the front page. The headline read, "Love Across the Divide. The Duke and the Shopkeeper Tell Their Story." It was fair. Halsworth had included the criticisms, quotes from unnamed sources questioning the match, references to Horace's annulment petition, but he'd also included their side in their own words, presented without mockery or condescension. The response was immediate. Some papers called it a publicity stunt, but others picked up the story and suddenly the narrative shifted. Instead of just being scandalous, they were also romantic. Instead of just being inappropriate, they were also brave. Letters started arriving at the townhouse, some vitriolic, but others supportive. A merchant's wife wrote to say she'd married for love despite her family's objections, and was glad to see someone with status doing the same. A widow sent a donation to a charity in Eliza's name. A group of shopkeepers in Cheapside published a letter defending her character. "It's working," Margaret said, reading through the pile of correspondence. "People are actually listening." But the biggest shift came from an unexpected source. Adrian's mother requested a meeting. They met at the Dowager Duchess's residence, an imposing townhouse in Mayfair that Eliza had never entered. Adrian's mother received them in her drawing room, seated stiffly in a high-backed chair. "Adrian," she said, and "Eliza." It was the first time she'd used Eliza's name. They sat across from her, and for a long moment, no one spoke. "I read the article," the Dowager Duchess finally said. "And?" Adrian asked. "And I realized I may have been hasty in my judgment." She looked at Eliza. "I believed you were taking advantage of my son, that you were using him for advancement, but reading your words, hearing how you describe your relationship," she paused. "I was wrong." Eliza blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me correctly. I was wrong." The Dowager Duchess's voice was stiff but sincere. "I've spent weeks trying to convince myself that this marriage was a disaster. But watching you at the auction, reading about how you met, seeing how Adrian looks at you," she sighed. "My late husband looked at me the same way, and I'd forgotten what that felt like." "Mother," Adrian started. "Let me finish." She held up a hand. "I'm not saying I approve of everything. I still think this could have been handled better. But I also recognize that you're both adults, and you've made your choice. And Horace's behavior," her expression hardened. "He's gone too far. Filing for annulment, hiring false witnesses, trying to destroy you both in court. It's unconscionable." "Will you testify against him?" Adrian asked carefully. "I'll do better than that. I'll make it clear to anyone who asks that I support this marriage, that I recognize Eliza as my daughter-in-law and the rightful Duchess of Ashford." She looked directly at Eliza. "I won't pretend we'll be close. We're very different people, but you're family now. And I protect family." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This doesn't solve all your problems. Horace is still pushing for annulment, and there are plenty of people who'll side with him regardless of what I say." The Dowager Duchess stood. "But it does mean you have one more ally, and in this world, allies matter." They left half an hour later, and in the carriage, Eliza finally let herself cry. "Hey," Adrian said, pulling her close. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect her to..." She wiped her eyes. "I thought she'd hate me forever." "She's stubborn, but she's not unreasonable." Adrian kissed her forehead, and she meant what she said. Once she's on your side, she stays there. "We're actually doing this," Eliza said wonderingly. "We're actually winning." "We're not done yet. The court case is still pending, and Horace won't give up just because my mother switched sides. But it's progress." "Yes," Adrian smiled. "It's progress." The court hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later, and they spent that time preparing. Adrian's solicitor interviewed witnesses, gathered evidence, built their case. But what surprised everyone was how many people volunteered to testify on their behalf. Samuel Wright submitted a statement about Adrian's sound business judgment. Lady Thornfield wrote a detailed letter about Eliza's character. The vicar who'd married them testified that both had seemed completely rational and willing. Even some of Adrian's political allies came forward, saying they'd seen no evidence of mental instability. and when the Dowager Duchess submitted her statement declaring that her son was of sound mind and that the marriage was legitimate, the tide truly turned. The hearing itself was almost anticlimactic. Horace's lawyer presented the false witnesses, but Adrian's solicitor tore them apart. He produced evidence of Graves's history of paid testimony. He showed that the physician who'd supposedly examined Adrian had actually been in Scotland at the time. He demonstrated, methodically and thoroughly, that every piece of Horace's case was fabricated. The judge was an older man who looked increasingly irritated as the hearing progressed. When Horace's lawyer tried to argue that even if the specific evidence was flawed, the general principle remained that Adrian had acted rashly, the judge cut him off.
"I've heard enough," he said. "Lord Horace, your petition is denied. The marriage between Lord Adrian Blackthorne and Lady Eliza Blackthorne, is legal and valid. This court finds no evidence of coercion, undue influence, or mental incapacity." He looked at Horace with obvious distaste. "And I would advise you to cease your harassment of the couple, or I'll consider it contempt of court." The gavel came down, and it was over.
In the hallway outside, Eliza sagged against the wall. "We won. We won," Adrian confirmed, looking slightly stunned. Horace stormed past them without a word, his face purple with rage. But Eliza didn't care. They'd beaten him. In court, in public, completely. That evening, they hosted a small dinner, just their core group of allies. Lady Thornfield, Samuel Wright and his wife, the Ashbys, Margaret, and Adrian's mother, who arrived late but with a bottle of expensive wine. To the Duke and Duchess of Ashford, Lady Thornfield toasted, who proved that love and stubbornness can overcome even the stupidest obstacles. Everyone laughed and drank, and for the first time in months, Eliza felt like she could breathe. Later, when most of the guests had left, Adrian found her standing by the window, looking out at the London streets. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That we actually did it. We fought everyone, your family, society, the courts, and we won." "We did." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Though I think we're still going to face some resistance." "Probably. There are people who'll never accept me." She leaned back against him. "But enough do. And that's what matters." "What do you want to do now?" Adrian asked. "Now that the immediate crisis is over?" Eliza thought about it. "I want to reopen the shop, not run it myself. Margaret can manage it. But I want it to stay open. I want to show people that being a duchess doesn't mean forgetting where I came from." "Done. What else?" "I want to help people like us, women who married above their station, merchants trying to break into society, anyone who's being pushed out because they don't fit the mold." She turned in his arms. "I want to make it easier for the next person who tries this." Adrian smiled. "That sounds perfect. And I want to make your uncle's life as difficult as possible for at least the next decade." Also perfect. They stood there in the quiet townhouse, holding each other, and Eliza realized something. She was happy. Not perfectly happy. There were still battles to fight, people to win over, adjustments to make. But fundamentally, deeply happy. She'd found a partner who saw her, who valued her, who'd been willing to fight the entire world just to keep her. And she'd proven to herself that she could survive in his world without losing herself. That was worth everything. Downstairs, she heard Margaret laugh at something Lady Thornfield said. The sound drifted up through the house, warm and familiar. "Come on," Adrian said. "Let's go back down. We're missing our own celebration." They rejoined the party, and Eliza let herself enjoy it. Let herself believe, for the first time, that this might actually work. They'd won the first battle. But as she glanced out the window one more time, she saw a figure standing across the street. Just watching. Just waiting. The fight wasn't over yet, but for tonight, they could celebrate. The attack came 6 days after the wedding. Eliza was at the shop. She'd insisted on keeping it open despite Adrian's protests, when 3 men walked in just before closing. They didn't look at the candy, they looked at her. "You're the Duchess now," one of them said. He was tall, with a scar running down his left cheek. "Fancy title for a shop girl." Eliza's hand moved toward the iron poker she kept behind the counter. "The shop is closed. You need to leave." "We're not here to buy sweets." The man stepped closer. "We're here to deliver a message." "Then deliver it and get out. Lord Horace wants you to know he doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive." The man's smile was ugly.
He also wants you to know that accidents happen. Shops catch fire. People get hurt. Would be a shame if something happened to your sister. Eliza's blood turned to ice. If you touch Margaret,
We won't have to. Not if you do the smart thing. He leaned against the counter. Annul the marriage, leave London, disappear, and everyone stays safe. Get out, Eliza said, her voice shaking with rage. Think about it. She grabbed the poker and swung it at his head. He ducked, laughing, and the other two men moved forward. Eliza backed toward the door to the rear room, poker raised, knowing she was about to get hurt but not caring. The shop door burst open. Adrian's driver, Thomas, came through first, followed by two footmen. They weren't large men, but they moved with purpose, positioning themselves between Eliza and the intruders. The lady asked you to leave, Thomas said calmly. The scarred man assessed the situation, then spat on the floor. This isn't over. They left, and Eliza's knees nearly gave out. Thomas caught her elbow. Your Grace, are you hurt? No, How did you know? His Grace had us watching the shop, said Lord Horace might try something. Thomas looked grim. We should get you home. Eliza wanted to argue, to insist she could handle herself, but her hands were shaking too badly to hold the poker anymore. Adrian was waiting when she arrived at the townhouse. He took one look at her face and pulled her into his arms. They threatened Margaret, Eliza said against his chest. I know, Thomas sent word. Adrian's voice was controlled, but she could feel the fury vibrating through him. She's safe. I had her brought here an hour ago. She's upstairs with the housekeeper. They want me to annul the marriage. That's not happening. Eliza pulled back to look at him. Adrian, they threatened to burn down the shop, to hurt Margaret. This is getting dangerous. Which is why we're not backing down. He led her to the study, where a stack of papers sat on his desk. I've been waiting for them to make a move like this. Now they have. What do you mean? Threats are illegal. Attempted intimidation of a peer's wife is a serious crime. Adrian picked up one of the documents. I've had investigators gathering evidence on Horace for weeks. Every shady business deal, every bribe, every corner he's cut. And now we add witness testimony about today's threats. You're going to have him arrested? I'm going to have him ruined. Adrian's smile was cold. He wanted a war. He's going to get one. Eliza sat down heavily. This is insane. We're talking about legal proceedings, investigations. This could take months. It won't. Adrian pulled out another folder. Because I'm not doing this through the courts. I'm doing it through Parliament. He explained his plan. Horace had made enemies over the years. Nobles he'd cheated, merchants he'd destroyed, politicians he'd crossed. Adrian had spent the last month quietly reaching out to all of them, building a coalition. Tomorrow, he would present evidence of Horace's crimes to a parliamentary committee. Not just the threats against Eliza, but years of corruption and abuse of power. If this works, Adrian said, Horace won't just lose his influence. He'll lose everything. And if it doesn't work, then we keep fighting. He took her hand. But I think it will work, because people are tired of being afraid of him. They just needed someone to go first. Eliza wanted to believe him, but she'd seen the look in those men's eyes today, the casual cruelty. This wasn't a game to Horace. It was survival. He'll fight back, she said. Let him try. And the parliamentary session was scheduled for the following afternoon. Adrian spent the morning in meetings, finalizing testimony and making sure every piece of evidence was documented. Eliza paced the townhouse, too nervous to sit still. Margaret found her in the drawing room, staring out the window. You're going to wear a hole in the carpet, Margaret said. I can't stop thinking about what could go wrong. What could go right, you mean? Margaret sat down, pulling Eliza with her. Adrian knows what he's doing, and he's not alone. Lady Thornfield sent word this morning she's testifying too. So is Mr. Wright. Even some of the lords who've been avoiding you are speaking up. Because it's safe now, Eliza said bitterly. Because Adrian made it safe. So? That's what leaders do. They go first. Margaret squeezed her hand. You went first too. You stood up to every person who tried to make you feel small. You married him knowing what it would cost. That's bravery, Eliza. Don't forget that now. Eliza leaned her head on her sister's shoulder. What if it's not enough? Then we figure out what comes next. Same as always. The parliamentary chamber was packed.
Adrian had expected that. Scandal always drew a crowd. What he hadn't expected was the composition of that crowd. Lords who'd avoided him for weeks were present. Merchants stood in the gallery. Even a few journalists had somehow gained entry. Horace sat near the front, his face composed but his knuckles white on the armrest. The committee chairman, Lord Westbrook, called the session to order. He was an elderly man who'd served in Parliament for 40 years and had a reputation for fairness. "We're here to address accusations of misconduct against Lord Horace Blackthorne," Westbrook said. "Lord Adrian Blackthorne has brought forth evidence. Let's begin." Adrian stood and presented his case methodically. He started with the business dealings. Contracts broken, competitors sabotaged, bribes paid to officials. He had ledgers, correspondence, testimony from victims. Then he moved to the personal attacks, the campaign against Eliza, the manufactured scandal, the threats. "Yesterday," Adrian said, 3 men entered my wife's shop and threatened violence against her and her sister if she didn't annul our marriage. Those men have been identified as associates of Lord Horace." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "That's a lie," Horace said, standing. "I have no knowledge of any such incident." "Then perhaps you can explain this." Adrian held up a letter. "Correspondence from your personal secretary to one Thomas Ridley instructing him to discourage the shopkeeper by any means necessary. The letter is dated 3 days before the incident." Horace's face went pale. "That's a forgery. It's been authenticated by 3 independent experts," Adrian cut in, "as has this second letter and this third one, and the dozen others documenting your campaign of intimidation." Lord Westbrook took the letters, examining them. His expression grew darker with each one. "Lord Horace," he said finally, "these are serious accusations. Made by a man who's been compromised by a woman of questionable character." "Careful," Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. "You're speaking about my wife. Your wife who trapped you into marriage." "Enough!" Westbrook slammed his gavel. "Lord Horace, you will refrain from personal attacks. This committee will review the evidence and hear testimony. You'll have your chance to respond." The testimony took 3 hours. Lady Thornfield spoke about Horace's attempts to force her out of business ventures. Mr. Wright described bribes and threats. A dozen other witnesses came forward, each adding to the mountain of evidence. By the time they finished, Horace looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Lord Horace," Westbrook said, "do you wish to respond?" Horace stood. For a moment he seemed to gather himself, to find some of his old authority. Then he looked at Adrian, and whatever he saw there made him deflate. "No," he said quietly. "I have nothing to say." The committee withdrew to deliberate. Adrian remained in his seat, not allowing himself to hope yet. Eliza had been watching from the gallery. She came down now, slipping into the seat beside him. "You did well," she said. "It's not over yet." "I know, but still." She took his hand. "Thank you for all of this." "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You could have walked away at any point, married someone easy, lived a comfortable life, but you didn't." She squeezed his fingers. "So thank you." Adrian was about to respond when the committee returned. Westbrook looked tired. After reviewing the evidence and hearing testimony, this committee finds Lord Horace Blackthorne guilty of corruption, intimidation, and abuse of power. We recommend immediate removal from all committee positions and a formal censure. Furthermore, we are referring the matter to the Crown for potential criminal prosecution. The chamber erupted. Some people cheered, others shouted protests. Horace sat frozen, his face ashen. Adrian felt something release in his chest. Not triumph exactly, just relief. It was over. The aftermath came in waves. First, the social consequences. Families who'd supported Horace quietly distanced themselves. Invitations that had been withdrawn were suddenly extended again. People who'd cut Adrian dead in the street now nodded politely when they passed. Eliza hated the hypocrisy of it, but she understood the practicality. "They're cowards," she said one evening over dinner. "They're survivors," Adrian corrected. "They align with whoever has power. Right now, that's us. Does that make you feel better?" "No, but it makes things easier." The business partnership stabilized. With Horace's influence gone, the investors who'd fled came creeping back. Adrian accepted some and rejected others, making it clear that loyalty, or at least honesty, mattered.
Lady Thornfield visited regularly, becoming something of a mentor to Eliza. She taught her which battles to fight and which to ignore, which social rules were inviolate and which could be bent. The trick, she said over tea one afternoon, is knowing when to conform and when to rebel. Rebel too much, and they'll destroy you. Conform too much, and you'll lose yourself. How do you know the difference? Eliza asked. You don't, not always. You just do your best and accept that you'll get it wrong sometimes. Lady Thornfield smiled. But you're doing better than most. You haven't apologized for existing, which is more than I can say for half the women in London. The shop presented a different problem. Eliza couldn't run it anymore, not with her duties as a duchess, but she didn't want to sell it either. It's all I have left of my parents, she told Adrian one night. Then keep it. Hire someone to manage it. That feels like giving up. It's not giving up. It's adapting. He pulled her close. You don't have to be a shopkeeper anymore, Eliza, but you don't have to stop being yourself either. She thought about that for a long time. Finally, she hired a young woman named Sarah, who'd been apprenticing with a baker and had good business sense. Eliza would visit weekly, checking the books and making decisions, but Sarah ran the day-to-day operations. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The real test came 6 months later at the Duchess of Somerset's winter ball. It was the first major social event Eliza had attended as a duchess, and she was terrified. Adrian had assured her it would be fine, that people had accepted them, but Eliza knew better. Acceptance and tolerance weren't the same thing. The ballroom was magnificent, crystal chandeliers, gold leaf, hundreds of candles. Eliza felt desperately out of place in her borrowed gown and hastily learned dance steps.
Breathe, Adrian murmured as they entered. I'm breathing. You're holding your breath, she exhaled shakily. Better? Much. They made their way through the crowd. Some people greeted them warmly. Others offered polite nods. A few turned away entirely, but fewer than Eliza expected. Then she saw her.
The Dowager Duchess of Ashford, Adrian's mother, standing near the fireplace, surrounded by her usual coterie of society matrons. She'd refused all contact since the wedding, had sent back every letter Adrian wrote unopened. We can avoid her, Adrian said quietly. No. Eliza straightened her spine. We can't avoid her forever. They approached slowly. The women around the Dowager noticed them first, their conversation faltering. The Dowager turned, and for a moment her face was utterly blank. Mother, Adrian said. Adrian. Her voice was cool. And Eliza. The way she said the name, like she was tasting something unpleasant, made Eliza's temper flare. But she remembered Lady Thornfield's advice. Pick your battles. Your Grace, Eliza said, offering a small curtsy. The Dowager's eyebrow rose. You've learned to curtsy. How industrious. Adrian stiffened, but Eliza put a hand on his arm. I had an excellent teacher, though I still can't waltz worth a damn. One of the matrons gasped. The Dowager's expression didn't change for a long moment. Then she smiled, just slightly, but enough. Neither could I at your age, she said. Stepped on your grandfather's feet at my debut. He never let me forget it. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even acceptance. But it was a crack in the wall. Perhaps you could give me some advice, Eliza said carefully. I'd hate to embarrass Adrian by injuring his feet. The Dowager looked at her son, then back at Eliza. I suppose I could spare a few minutes? They moved to a quieter corner, and the Dowager proceeded to give Eliza a rapid lesson in waltz technique that was more criticism than instruction. But she was talking to her. That was something. You're not what I expected, the Dowager said finally. I know. I wanted someone polished, accomplished, someone who knew how to navigate this world. I'm learning. Yes, you are. The Dowager's expression softened almost imperceptibly. And you make my son happy. That's not nothing. It's everything to me, Eliza said honestly. The Dowager studied her. I may never fully approve of this marriage, but I can acknowledge that Adrian chose you knowing the cost. And you chose him the same way. That takes a certain kind of courage. She paused. Or madness. Probably both, Eliza admitted. The Dowager almost smiled. Yes, probably. When Adrian found them 20 minutes later, they were discussing the merits of different dance masters. He looked so surprised that Eliza nearly laughed.
Mother was just explaining why Lord Pemberton's footwork is atrocious, Eliza said. He dances like a wounded bear, the Dowager agreed. Always has. Adrian looked between them, clearly not sure what had happened, but relieved nonetheless. The rest of the ball passed in a blur. Eliza danced with Adrian, with several lords who were polite, if not warm, and once with Lady Thornfield, who led because she said the orchestra was too slow for proper dancing. As the evening wound down, Eliza found herself on the balcony, catching her breath. You survived, Margaret said, appearing beside her. She'd come as Eliza's companion and had spent most of the evening trying not to stare at the chandeliers. Barely. You did more than survive. You held your own. Margaret grinned. And you made the Dowager almost smile. That's practically a miracle. She still doesn't like me. No, but she respects you. That's better. Eliza looked out over the gardens, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The fear, the fighting, the endless social battles. It had been exhausting and painful and nothing like what she'd imagined. But standing here in a ballroom where people treated her like she belonged, even if they didn't mean it, she realized something. She'd won. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. 3 years later, Eliza stood in the same shop on Ludgate Street, watching Sarah help a customer. The shop had expanded. They now sold chocolates and imported teas alongside the traditional candies, and business was better than ever. You're smiling, Adrian said from the doorway. I'm remembering the first time you walked in here, dripping water everywhere, looking completely out of place. I still feel out of place sometimes. Liar. You love it here. He did. They both did. The shop had become a refuge, a place where they could escape the demands of the duchy and just be themselves. Margaret appeared from the back room, carrying a tray of fresh peppermints. She was engaged now to a lawyer's clerk, a quiet man who made her laugh. The wedding was planned for summer. These need to cool, she said, setting down the tray. And you need to get going. You've got that dinner with Lady Thornfield. We have time, Eliza said. Not if you want to change first. Margaret shooed them toward the door. Go. I can handle things here. In the carriage, Adrian took Eliza's hand. Do you ever regret it? Any of it? Every day, Eliza said honestly. And then I wake up next to you, and I remember why it was worth it. That's not very romantic. I'm not very romantic. You knew that when you married me. Adrian laughed and kissed her hand. True enough. The dinner with Lady Thornfield turned into a late night of wine and conversation. They talked business, politics, the ongoing saga of trying to reform certain parliamentary procedures. Lady Thornfield had become one of Adrian's closest advisors and one of Eliza's dearest friends. You two have done well, she said as the evening wound down. Better than I expected, honestly. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Eliza said dryly. I mean it as a compliment. Most marriages like yours fail. The social pressure, the constant scrutiny, it breaks people. Lady Thornfield raised her glass. But you didn't break. You adapted. That's rare. We had help, Adrian said. Yes, but you also had each other. That's what made the difference. She smiled. I'm glad I was wrong about you. Wrong about what? I thought you'd fail. Thought it was impossible for a duke and a shopkeeper to make it work. Lady Thornfield's expression turned serious. But you proved that what matters isn't where you come from. It's what you're willing to fight for. Eliza thought about that on the way home. About all the fights, public and private, large and small, about the people who'd helped and the people who'd tried to destroy them. Do you think we changed anything? She asked Adrian. What do you mean? Society. The rules. All of it. Did we actually change anything, or did we just survive? Adrian considered the question. I think we changed ourselves. And maybe that's enough. Is it? For me, yes, because I'm not the man I was when I walked into your shop. I'm not performing anymore. I'm not trying to be what everyone expects. He squeezed her hand. I'm just me, and that's because of you. Eliza leaned her head on his shoulder. You're getting sentimental in your old age. I'm 39. Ancient. They arrived home to find a message waiting. The Dowager Duchess was hosting a family dinner and wanted them to attend. It was the first time she'd included Eliza in the invitation without being prompted. Progress, Adrian said, reading
reading the note. Or a trap. Always the optimist. Eliza smiled despite herself. Someone has to keep you grounded. They went to bed that night in the townhouse that had become home, in the life they'd built together against all odds. Eliza lay awake for a while, listening to Adrian breathe beside her. She thought about the girl she'd been, the shopkeeper who'd told a duke to stop dripping on her floor. She'd been braver then, or maybe just more naive. She hadn't known what she was getting into, but she'd do it again, all of it, because the truth was, she hadn't just survived. She'd lived, really lived, in a way she never could have imagined, and that was worth every fight, every whisper, every moment of fear. Years later, when people talked about the Duke and Duchess of Ashford, they told different versions of the story. Some said it was a romance, a powerful man who fell in love with a commoner and defied society for her. Some said it was a scandal, a duke who threw away his reputation for a woman who didn't belong. Some said it was a business arrangement, two people who needed each other and made it work. The truth was more complicated and more simple than any of those versions. It was two people who saw each other clearly, not the titles or the roles or the expectations, but the actual humans underneath. And having seen each other, they couldn't walk away. The shop on Ludgate Street remained open for another 30 years. It became something of a landmark, the place where the Duke of Ashford bought lemon drops every week like clockwork. Tourists would sometimes stop by, hoping to catch a glimpse of the infamous couple. They were usually disappointed. Adrian and Eliza looked like any other married couple, arguing occasionally about trivial things, finishing each other's sentences, moving around each other with the comfortable familiarity of long partnership. Nothing special, nothing remarkable, except that Adrian Blackthorne, who'd spent his whole life being looked at and never truly seen, had found someone who saw him. And Eliza Hartwell, who'd learned to expect nothing from people in power, had found someone who gave her everything, not because she asked for it, but because he wanted to. And in the end, that simple truth, that they chose each other every day, despite everything, was more powerful than any title or scandal or social rule. It was just love, messy, complicated, hard-won love, the kind that mattered, the kind that lasted.